Welcome, everyone. This is Group Dentistry Now's DSO Study Club, and we appreciate everybody joining today. We are going to give everyone a couple of minutes to file in, and then we'll get started, probably about 2-3 minutes. This is the Emerging DSO Growth, how Areo Dental grew 20% with connected technology. And boy, wouldn't everybody like to grow 20%, maybe even 10% at this point. It's going to be a great conversation. We have the co-founders and co-CEOs of Areo Dental with us. They were emerging groups to watch winners in 2024, and we've done some podcasts with them and have spent quite a bit of time with the duo. So it's going to be a great conversation. So I'm just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to file in. If you have questions, we had a bunch of questions that actually came in when you registered. So thank you for those questions. We have more than we'll probably be able to get to in this hour, but we'll try and get through all of them. And then also this is going to be recorded. So if there is anybody that you'd like to share this with, or maybe unfortunately you can't spend the entire hour with us, we sure hope you can, you'll have access to the recording after this. Probably have it up on our website and our YouTube channel by the end of the day, and we will send out an email to share that link with you tomorrow morning. Thanks to Henry Schein One for sponsoring this. We really appreciate them doing that. Without them, we wouldn't be able to put on this webinar. So just another minute, and then we will make sure we have just about everybody that is going to be here live next minute or so, and we'll get started. Oh, and also any questions that you have during the session, you can either put those in the chat area or in the Q&A area. Either place will catch them. And if we see one that we can address right away, we will. If not, and we can't get to it, I'll make sure that one of the three of us answers that question via email, unless you're anonymous, and then we will have no way of knowing. But if you tell us who you are, then we will we'll make sure we answer it. Okay, now we are about 3 minutes past. So I just wanted to introduce everybody again. This is the DSO Study Club. I'm Bill Neumann with Group Dentistry Now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I know your time is valuable. We will make sure that we will go until 4 Eastern, so we won't go any longer than that. This will be recorded. Ask your questions if you'd like in the chat or the Q&A. Thank you to Henry Schein One for sponsoring this webinar. We have with us Anushka Gaglani. She is the co-founder and co-CEO of Areo Dental Group. And we also have Abhishek Nagaraj, also the co-founder and co-CEO of Areo Dental Group. And yes, they are a husband and wife team. So just like Kim and I are, I think maybe that's why we get along so well. It's great to have you both on the webinar.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks for having us. We're very excited to be here, and thank all of the participants for being here as well.
Yeah, the pleasure is truly ours, and we're super excited to share how we did this, and hopefully all dental groups can accomplish 20% or more of same-store growth.
I am going to drop our little slide here for the time being so everybody can see you. And oh, it's good to see you. You're bigger on the screen. So why don't we go through a little bit, maybe an introduction, your backgrounds, and then how you formed Areo Dental, and then maybe talk a little bit about this growth that you've had, 20%. Maybe it's not just clickbait. You really have grown rapidly. And I think a lot of the conversation is going to be wrapped around how you've leveraged technology to grow so quickly. Get started for a couple minutes on your backgrounds and the DSO.
Anushka, take it away.
Yeah. So we essentially, I graduated dental school and I was working here in Chicago for a couple of years. And then when Abhishek, he was in New York, he left New York, moved to Chicago, and we were associating for other people at that time. And we decided, you know what, let's go out and do it on our own. We got engaged and we're like, we're going to open our first practice together. So at the end of 2015, we bought a practice where the dentist was retiring. Essentially, it was a practice I think he probably should have sold 5 or 7 years beforehand. We went in, remodeled the whole thing, and I think it was doing a couple 100,000 revenue. Within the first probably year and a half to 2 years, we took it to about 1.5 million. And then we got tired of looking at each other. We saw each other every single day. So we're like, okay, we need we need to not see each other every day. We went and bought our second practice. And from there, every year we kind of added a practice except for during COVID. Um, and we haven't looked back since then.
Yeah, it's pretty spot on. I think you covered most of it. One thing I will add is I think one of the things that we were super energetic and passionate about was growing teams and taking people, because when you grow one person, you're not just growing one person, you're actually impacting their families and their families, and so on and so forth. And when we remember in 2015, we obviously didn't have any business background. And when we hired our first employee to currently where we are today, we know for a fact we've been able to touch and impact a lot of people, and that's what gets us out of bed every morning. And I think a lot of the energy is what probably creates momentum, and technology is a part of that momentum. And we're super pumped to talk about that today.
Excellent. So let's talk about the 20% growth number. That is, it's fascinating, and we were talking about this before we actually started the webinars. There's several people in the industry that were talking about your growth. So this is not a made up number. This is legitimate. It's been verified from others. So this is great. So talk a little bit about that. Where did that 20% come from? Is that, is it strictly using technology? Is it a combination of things? Talk a little bit about that.
I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. Strong leadership at the practice levels to scalable tech, right? A lot of tight operational systems, really clean financial metrics. I think it's a combination of all of those things. Anushka and I are super passionate about having double-digit growth year over year. I think we're almost obsessed about doing that year over year, because if you take the rule of 72, if you grow 10% a year, it takes 7.2 years to double your business, right? But if you do that at 20%, it takes half the time to double your business, right? And if you continue to do at 10%, it actually halves the time each time. And I think it's really a numbers game at that point, but truly there's a lot of the tech integration that has to happen. A lot of people have to row in the same direction. A great team usually helps with that, and we can dive into how some of our team members have really impacted that. I wish we could say we've done this alone, but we haven't. Anushka, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I would just say I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think it's incremental growth, right? Doing a couple percent year over year, I think is it's one way of doing things. And I think to me, sometimes it can almost be harder. Doing 20%, if you're kind of aiming for that number, you have to have a different kind of mindset, a different way of thinking about how are you going to accomplish that. So you're kind of cutting out a lot of the noise and just focusing on the things that are going to get you there, which is what we've done mostly through operations, as Abhishek said. And of course, technology has definitely been a part of making our operational functions smoother.
Well, before we go any further, I wanted to ask a series of questions to the audience. So, hopefully you're paying attention. We're going to find out a couple of things about number of locations, so we can gauge just the size of the organizations that are on the webinar. You're going to ask a question about some of your biggest challenges, and then the technologies that you're currently using. And I think that'll really help us frame out how we answer a lot of these questions that have come in. So first question is a super easy one. Everybody should be able to answer this. Number of locations. So I'm going to launch that. Hopefully you can see that on your end. All right, I see some people answering, so this will be great. It's always fun to kind of watch this. And then in a second, I will share this with everyone. All right. A couple more people. Give you like another minute or two. Well, another 10 seconds or so. All right. Let me end the poll here. Last minute. One more person. There we go. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share the results. So can you all see it? Okay, good. So what do we have here? It looks like we have 53% are 4 to 10 locations. Okay. Very, very interesting. I would have thought it would have actually been 1 to 3. So I am glad I didn't bet on that one. Very, very good. Okay, that gives us an idea. So, all right, now I'm going to give another poll question here. Let's go with biggest challenge. And so you can only answer one. Let's see, and this is, wait a second, I've got to dump this. Hold on, sorry. Stop sharing this. Okay, now let's go into this. All right, here's the biggest challenge. Now I can launch this. So this is going to be here, just a single choice: managing operations across all locations, hiring and retaining staff, revenue cycle management, implementing new technology, or tracking and analyzing. Any predictions here on what may be who's going to be the winner?
I think it's going to be hiring and retaining staff.
Yeah, I would go with that too.
Think you could be right. All right. I'm going to give this. All right. This looks good. And you would be correct. Yes. Yeah. So hiring, retaining staff, number one, actually tied for 2. We have managing operations across all locations, the implementation of new technology. So we want to make sure we focus on that. And then insurance and revenue cycle management. And then really the analytics was last. So either everybody's figured out analytics or nobody's measuring anything. I'm not sure. Okay. And so let me go back here. I've got one more, and then we're going to get into the Q&A here. But I think this is really good to kind of get an idea for where everybody stands. All right. Let's go. Sorry, that is not what I want. Let me give you one. That's my last one. Which technologies are you currently using? Okay. Should say using. Which technologies are you currently using? And you can answer multiple choice here. So if you're using everything, of course, I don't think you'd be doing server and cloud-based, but you can check multiple here. So which technologies are you currently using? What do you have an idea of, do you think cloud-based will beat out server? What do we think?
I don't personally, I don't think so. I think
Should.
I think, I mean, at least a lot of the practices that we see when we're trying to buy are still on the server. So I would say a large
Yeah.
majority are on the server, considering this is a 4 to 10 location group. It could be a 50-50 on this.
That's where I'm going to.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. This is really interesting. So I'll share the results here. And so a little bit more on the cloud-based side of things. Still a lot of people using servers. RCM, the 37% are using some type of RCM software. 40% real-time analytics. Okay, so AI-driven diagnostic tools and voice AI is probably still, it seems like it's a little bit in its infancy, but there are a lot of companies out there that are offering that. All right, well, great. I appreciate everybody answering those questions. I think that gives us a really, really good perspective on where things stand. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cloud-based PMS and scaling. So to maybe discuss, because at one point you were using server-based PMS, and then you moved to cloud-based. Maybe talk a little bit about that decision and how that's impacted your group.
Yeah, I think, we were on Dentrix Core for the longest time. So we started off with that, and I think at the sixth practice mark, we realized it was just getting a lot tougher. Number one, security. Having data breaches, it was just becoming a more common thing in terms of what the industry was facing. So we were getting a little bit nervous about that. The second thing is we actually had an IT company who was doing our backups, and we lost a small amount, a subsection of our X-rays at one point. We went to them and said, "Hey, what happened here? And where's the backup?" And they said we actually didn't back it up, even though we were paying them for that. So that was a big wake-up call for us, that, it was time to move on from the server-based system into cloud-based. Additionally, I think another part of that was, we were practicing out of a couple of different practices, part-time in each practice, and then we had a couple of doctors doing that as well. In addition to who was back then our director of ops, she's now our VP of ops, and it was just getting too difficult to be able to log in and, have to log into some remote system and get into the schedules. So I think those were all factors that helped us make the decision to moving into cloud-based.
I would probably segue, but probably add a couple more things. I think instant visibility. I think Anushka, you hit, you touched on this. Having VPNs or remote support to log into computers. I mean, it felt a little bit antiquated, right? You should be able to log into a server. I mean, into your web browser and be able to get on your software. I think that was huge. I think centralized management too. You can look at the visibility of all your locations from one place. Like, how cool is that? And I think faster decision making. An example would be, okay, we need to add a root canal buildup and a crown in one location, but it's going to affect all the other providers. You put in an explosion code in one central area, and you can auto-populate that across multiple locations. I think that's awesome, right? It's a lot of it saves a lot of time for our operational folks.
Was it a relatively easy switch going from server-based to cloud, or were there some challenges there?
It was hard.
Yeah, our VP of Ops, Caitlin, she's amazing. She handled pretty much the whole thing. So for us, it was easy.
Yes.
I'm sure she would not say the same thing.
It was hard in general, right? Moving from something that you're used to for 10 years, even though it's on the server, servers have issues, and moving into a cloud-based system that, albeit it's easier initially when you make such a big switch, taking your entire organization into that change management is tough. Lots of training, I think 2 to 3 months of like a little bit of downtime, revenue took a dip, right? So there was some of that, but in hindsight, we would still do it again.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it at the size we were at instead of waiting for a longer amount of time, because then we would have taken a much bigger hit, I think, and having to retrain everybody.
Agreed.
Now, are you bringing on any practices? So are your practices are all acquisitions, correct? Or no, some de
Uh,
novos?
Mix of
yeah, mix of the two.
So,
yeah,
so
mix
we're
of both.
so that's well, it's not easy. None of it's easy, but it's probably easier with the de novo because then you can say this is what we're going to use. But when you're acquiring a practice, were all of them using the same practice management software? It couldn't have been that easy. So that was probably difficult for the staff to say, not only are we moving from server to cloud, but we're also changing from, this PMS to the cloud base that you're on now, which is Dentrix Ascend. Is that what it is? Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
So that must have been really difficult.
Yeah, I can use the example of our most recent practice that we brought on. They were on, I think it was well, I don't remember the name of the
I
software,
think it's like Denti.
but it was antique, and it was very hard to make any sense of what was going on with that software. And we transitioned them. I think initially they had a little bit of a harder time, but they're really I think for us, it was very important to have everybody on the same software. And because we'd already done the six originally and had gotten everybody on the same page there, doing the seventh one, it wasn't quite as much of a headache because we could really get our operations team to get over there and help them with that transition.
Couple questions coming in here. So regarding PMS, so what PMS system did they switch to? Dentrix Ascend. Um, this question or statement and a question. When you switch to cloud-based, it sounds like you ripped the Band-Aid off and did everything at once. Do you think that is the best way to do it? I would think to do 2 offices this week, then another two, etc. Thoughts on that?
Personally, we rip the Band-Aid. Yes, there's a method to the madness. You want to make a decision to switch all at once, but you don't have to pull the trigger in all offices. Generally, that's not how it pans out anyway. We did maybe 2 offices Thursday, Friday, the other two next week, Thursday, Friday, and it was kind of a transition like that.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
correct. That is how we spaced it out. We didn't just close for 2 days and do them all at one time. We did two at a time for 2 days at a time. So we took a hit for 2 days at a time in each practice.
got it. And then to kind of add on to that, also, this is about the PMS moving from server to cloud. I want to know about X-rays in a cloud-based system. Any latency, or is that still stored locally?
It's all stored up in the cloud. I don't know who Ascend backs up to. I don't know if it's Amazon, but it's all stored in the cloud. We haven't had, I mean, look, when you switch from server Dentrix Core to cloud, initially we thought there's a little bit of a lag, maybe like a 1 second lag in how long it takes for the X-rays to open. You really get used to it, and now it's not even an issue anymore. It's just one of those things. It just takes like a half a second because it does have to back up from the cloud. It's not an issue, it's a non-issue.
Okay. Boy, some more questions coming. These are great questions. With Dentrix Ascend, what were your first thoughts for paying for individual users? So is that, I guess that's something that is a concern versus paying per location. Is that the difference or?
Right, spot on.
Yeah.
Do you want to hit this,
Yeah.
Anushka?
You can go ahead.
Okay. Yes, yes, that the answer to that question is yes. You do switch from a paying like a bundled package, like with Dentrix Core, we paid a Dentrix Momentum package or whatever, $200 a month to you do change to a per user. Ultimately, look, it's the cost versus investment mindset, right? If you look at that as a cost, then yeah, it's a cost, but it's actually an investment. It's not, I think if you have 10 people, it'll cost you 400 or 500 bucks, but the data integration, the ease with which you'll navigate your practices will more than pay for itself.
And do you have any thoughts on at what point, and this is not a question though, this is my question, moving from, so we've got a number of people, the majority have 4 to 10 locations that are on this webinar. At what point switching from server-based to cloud is almost a necessity? When you have multiple locations, at some point you're gonna need to do that. So when, and you said doing it earlier versus later is a great strategy. But when did you feel like, hey, this is something that we really, really need to do? Like
When
when was that? Was it at 2 locations? Was it at when did you have a feel for when you realized that you needed to
Yeah.
make this move?
Honestly, if I could go back and if the solutions were as good back then, I think we would have switched. Right. The first location, we would have started off with cloud, to be very, very frank, because it would have saved us a lot of headache when we did do the transition. For us, I think the pain, we really started feeling it maybe around the 4 practice mark. Very honestly, maybe 3 to 4 practices. It just became a lot more difficult because we just could not travel between all of the locations to be able to look into the schedules or optimize whatever we were doing.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think in today's world, we would probably pull the trigger at one location. But back then, I think even cloud, although cloud wasn't in its infancy, right? Cloud, Amazon Cloud, they were around for 10 years in the mid 2015, 2016. But in dental, it was in its infancy. And I don't think all the kinks had been worked out yet. So they were a little glitchy, and I think they've come a long way now. There's a lot of really great cloud PMS systems.
This is a hot topic here. So another question. How did Caitlin approach the issue of employees not wanting to participate in training and then complaining it's difficult going to another PMS? I don't know if that's actually what happened, but
Is
this
this
was from an
for
anonymous. I don't think this was
Margaret?
Caitlin who said this, but it's anonymous, so who knows?
I think at the end of the day, well, I think there's a quote, you can make some of the people happy all of the time, you can make all of the people happy some of the time, but you can't make all of the people happy all of the time. It's just one of those things, right? We look at it as the greater good of the business. People are going to complain, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, but what does the business need? For us, we kind of looked at it that way, and the way that she dealt with it is just, hey, I'm here to support you. This is a much better solution. We're moving into the future. We don't want to be a dinosaur left behind. And it's going to make your job easier, right? In terms of, kind of looking at what's in it for them, right? Instead of having to, you have a patient go from one practice to another to see a specialist, as an example. Now we're having to print out, or not print out, but, share records through email and collecting all the information. Hey, guess what? Your job's easier now because they can just log in and look at it.
Exactly. Collecting balances is easier. You can text to pay people. It's all of these I think I remember we painted a picture first. We communicated to the teams that this is going to make your life significantly better. And because it's going to make your lives better, it's going to make our patient lives better. And patients are who pay our bills at the end of the day. And we've got to be at the, cutting edge of technology. And if we aren't doing that, to Anushka's point, we're getting left behind. We prefaced it with that. And then I remember we didn't have a lot of resistance at all, to be
Mhm.
honest with you. Maybe there was one or two people who were skeptical. How am I going to let this go? But they embraced it pretty quickly too.
Yeah. I think we were the ones complaining about it, to be very frank. Caitlin probably had to hear from us the most.
For sure. For sure.
Here, this is it's a couple other questions. This one, I'm not sure I understand it correctly, but it's cloud storage gets more and more expensive over time as the amount of data grows. Do you all have an archiving policy? Have you gotten to that point where you're like, this is just pretty much right now? And I can understand this as you have a ton of data and you're eventually going to be paying a fee for the amount of data that you're storing. But you're not at that point yet, probably.
We're not at the point, and to be honest, the way we look at it, we had to change servers a couple of times, right? Even the server was getting loaded down, so we had that expense regardless, along with the difficulties that come with having to upgrade a server. So for us, we look at it as, again, it's a cost of doing business. I'd rather just pay for more cloud storage than have to bring in an IT person to change up an entire server.
Absolutely. And the other important point too, Bill, here is your business is also growing at the same rate. So your percentage of cost that you're spending on cloud, yes, it's going up, but as a percentage of overall top line revenue, it's staying pretty consistent. And that's what matters at the end of the day.
Really good point. Yep, great point. Last question on that, and I think we'll move on because I want to talk about, we've got a bunch of other topics, but this is really fascinating. I wasn't sure we'd get this much engagement when it comes to practice management software, but there's still a lot of questions around it. Do you think changing actually increased your staffing satisfaction and resulted in better retention? We talked about that as as the biggest challenge, right? So even if they complained or did that not really, was that not a factor?
Personally, I didn't think so. I don't
Mm.
think it caused more retention. If there was a toxic work culture, then there's a toxic work culture, right? If the culture is happy, then I don't think software makes a very big difference. At least this is my personal opinion. Anushka, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think, I don't necessarily think that having software or changing software is going to cause or help retention, or all I know is from our end, it definitely has helped with training. For me, I find that the cloud-based software, Ascend in particular, has been very helpful to train people. For us, we're hiring people who don't necessarily have dental background. That's not what we're hiring for. We're hiring for people with personality and who can do the job. So being able to train them, that's what we were looking for. How much easier is it to train somebody on this software versus what we were on before? And I think it's leaps and bounds ahead.
What does that training look like exactly? How does that work?
So the nice thing about Ascend, again, we looked at other softwares, but since we're on Ascend, I can only speak to this. There's a little help button at the top of the screen, and anybody can log in if they don't know how to add a patient, as an example. They can just do a quick search and it'll just populate it. Versus before, there was this big manual, and every office had a manual, and I don't know where it was. I think it was probably like propping up a desk somewhere. And somebody had to go hunt that thing down, and and every time there was a software update, it's like, now what do we do? Because the manual is not valid, it's not appropriate anymore for the update. So in that sense, and the second piece to this is on Dentrix Core, there were all the terminology was all dental. So it would say like core buildup versus on the Ascend software, it will break it down as to what a core buildup you can actually put it in terms that somebody who doesn't have dental background can understand.
Yeah, and the real-time feedback feature is pretty cool too. I think Ascend, you can feedback to them in real time saying, hey, here's something that I think you guys should do that I had in my previous software in core that you, for example, that's you something that you really liked and that you want to see. And they're pretty good at making those changes pretty quickly. We've had a lot of those updates made because it's like a real-time software update. I think that's been a really cool feature.
Let's move from practice management to security and data management. So, which I guess this overlaps for sure. But cybersecurity, I mean, that's something I think that we should talk about. Seems top of mind. Whether it's emails that come in that are phishing for information, or people accidentally give access away to someone. I mean, are these concerns that you have? So how do you handle as an organization cybersecurity, and then also what do you do when it comes to protecting patient records and data, which they're both tied together, but.
I think the low-hanging fruit here is really having HIPAA compliant email, right? Like that's something that we can all do. And I don't know how many times we actually see when we're trying to buy a practice or looking at an acquisition where they have an at Gmail or at AOL.com where all the patient records are going there. And it always gives me PTSD when I see that. So I think having a HIPAA compliant email with end-to-end encryption and multi-factor authentication, I think that's something we do on all our practice emails, and then essentially also regular audits from time to time to make sure our patient data is secure. I think this needs to happen at the practice level, and it needs to be a part of some type of a calendar that people need to do.
Yeah. To add to that, on Ascend, we can see chart numbers. So we only communicate via chart numbers. We don't put patient names anywhere on any email, any text messages, nothing. It's chart numbers, even if our doctors have a question. So that's made it really nice to stay compliant.
Do you leverage, do you have an IT company that you work with? Do you have a cybersecurity company? How do you handle that?
Yeah. We do have an IT company, and they go in and patch the computers. They do like their updates as and when needed. So that's been really great. We can really trust them to make sure that that's taken care of. Cybersecurity, I think for us, it's a matter of at some point, I think every group is going to have some sort of breach, whether it's a small, large, something is probably going to happen. It's what is the impact of that? So for us, cybersecurity insurance is a must. Highly, highly recommend for those that don't have it. It may cost some amount of money, but I think it's very important.
Yeah, and I would add, make sure to get as much coverage as you can, right? Having like a $500,000 policy in today's world is probably not enough, right? Because a lot of these ransoms that we hear sometimes can go into the millions. So as much as you can get from your cybersecurity insurance.
Right. And it's not just the ransom, it's, shutting down a location or two
Right.
for X amount of days, and that impact that it has too. So yeah, it can reach millions very, very quickly.
Yeah. We saw with Change Healthcare, right? That whole thing impacted millions of people.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, good. Let's move on to revenue cycle management, which that was like the word of to like the acronym RCM of 2024, right? Everything all of a sudden went We went from, acquisitions in 2020, 21, and 22 to same store sales, a focus on revenue cycle management. Maybe talk a little bit about that. How do you handle that? Do you have any solutions that are that help with insurance claims? Can you talk a little bit about your revenue cycle management?
Absolutely. Do you want to take this?
Go ahead.
Okay. So we look at revenue cycle management as maybe 2 to 3 components. One is point of service collections, right? That's the piece that you can really make sure you can button that up, because when a patient's in your practice, make sure you collect the payment. That's the first piece of RCM. The second is when you bill to the insurance company, follow-ups have to be done on claims, and claims have to get adjudicated, claims have to get followed up, paid, and claims have to get posted. Those are the 3 components. Once they're posted, the back end pieces to reconcile your bank statements with the claims to make sure that the data is actually matching. This actually really, that's 4 components, but the first 3 are super important from at least a staffing and your team's perspective. And I think with getting insurance verification, I think Ascend has a really cool tool. I think, Anushka, it's called the
I think
Eligibility
it's called
Pro.
Eligibility Pro.
Real-time verification on insurances. I think that's been super impactful, right? It saves a ton of time for our teams as well. You can outsource that. I think there are quite a few outsourced options. You can take it out of the country if you like. We've certainly tried some of those things too, but we find that 80% of our verifications have been done through Ascend right now. So that's been great. As it comes to adjudicating claims, there's also some really cool companies that are actually able to post back and write back into your ledgers. I know that one of the things with Shine is their closed system, which is, I think, good and bad, right? Because people can't write back as easily or integrate as easily, but I think that's what makes it more secure, right? That's the other end of this. So there are companies like Zentist who can write back. There are some other companies who are trying to write back into your ledgers. I think that's the big piece. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the things too with Ascend that we have found you really useful is that you're able to kind of push through all of the claims at the end of the day. So there's one button and you can send everything out and it'll tell you right away if something's missing an attachment or whatnot. So it's really sped up the process for us and made sure that things are not falling through the cracks.
And how about digital payments? Do you have something like text to pay offerings like that? And how is that being? How do the patients feel about that? And how do you feel about it?
I can tell you how I feel about it. I am thrilled because I don't think I've had to order stamps for the offices in months. It's been great, I would come into the practice and see like stacks of envelopes, and they're like, we need another roll of stamps. Having text to pay has just been a game changer for us. Rather than waiting for somebody to print out statements, seal them, put addresses, etc., it's with the click of a button, we can send out statements. In fact, we just did it this morning. It's coming up on the end of the month. So we're like, all right, let's go ahead and send them out. And I think that's been very, very helpful.
I will add to text to pay. Sometimes, especially when patients owed us $50 and $100, like getting all these statements out was a real pain in the neck, right? Now it's just easy to collect those lower dollar amounts. The other side to this is it's also a little bit harder to collect thousands of dollars through a text, right? Most people don't want to do that. They want to be in the practice. They want to understand why they're signing up for treatment and all that. So I guess there's both sides to it, but I think it's been amazing in terms of collecting those smaller dollar amounts that you would have otherwise had to chase.
Yeah, yeah, that great points. You don't want to trust the mail anymore either. I've noticed things get lost a little bit more than they used to. So
Right. Especially bills, right? You
yeah,
gotta
yeah,
3 or 4 times.
exactly right. There's a check in there, all of a sudden the odds go down that it's actually going to get back to you. Um, Question came up here about electronic remittance in Ascend. Any thoughts? Just can you talk more about that? Any feedback?
Would that be the claims process, like electronic claims process?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Anushka, as you stated, it's super simple. You can batch claims. In fact, our providers can batch claims, make the necessary attachments, and with the click of one button, you can literally send out, if you saw 50 patients in one day, you can send out all those claims in like 5 seconds. I think that's a really cool feature, right? Very powerful and very efficient way to do things. And on the flip side, as I was stating earlier, electronically, you can get insurance verification, so you don't have to make patients wait or lose patients to another practice because you had to do this detailed insurance breakdown and the insurance company put you on hold for 45 minutes to be able to do that. So very efficient
I think the home screen too, what I like is on the home screen, it tells you the outstanding claims. It tells you claims that have not been sent out. So you can see the dollar amount actually of outstanding claims. So you know, instead of having to run a report, it's right in front of you, front and center. So you can go to our team and say what's happening here.
Yep.
Speaking of reports, this will segue into analytics and performance tracking. Maybe we start with what KPIs, I'm sure you're measuring a lot, but if you've got maybe the top 4 or 5 that you look at as the CEOs of the organization, can you run through those?
Absolutely. Um, as CEOs, I think it's really important for us to know three really important metrics. Number one is clinical expenses, right? Clinical expense is a bucket that we look at, which ideally for us, we need to see that under 11%. Again, this is variable, right? Because if a provider is producing a lot more clinical supplies, usually involves three components: dental supplies, lab fees, plus your cost of financing patients. At least for us, that's how we look at clinical expenses. We want that to be under 10, 11%. If we can do that, if it's 12%, there better be a boost in top line revenue quite significantly. Otherwise, our lab bills are out of whack and we aren't paying attention. We probably have more redos. That's kind of how we know, and we can zone in on that. Number two is comp and benefits. That's a big one, right? If you can stay under 50%, I think it's incredible, including doctor comp, right? Which is a big bucket. We all know that. If you're doing it under 50%, you're crushing it. And I know it's hard in today's world, but you've got to find ways. I know you can't cut your way into business, right? You've got to grow the top line. I think that's where the 20% growth comes into the picture, at least in our opinion. You've got to be able to grow the top line because there's only so much you can cut at the end of the day. The third piece is probably going to be your profitability at the end of it, right? Those are the two big buckets we look at as CEOs. And of course, we always dive in if there's an issue. If it's above 50%, then we can go into the practice level and understand why it's a little bit out of whack. And rent is another one. I actually wanted to add that. I think oftentimes we generally stay conservative on the rent side. I think people say, oh, we can do 10% rent, but costs escalate way quicker than revenues do at the end of the day. So we stay pretty conservative on the rent. Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think, if we're speaking about scorecards, every department has their own type of scorecard. So for the group as a whole, with our leadership team, when we get together, we're looking at what everyone else looks at, right? Production, collections. We do look at marketing. What is our cost per lead? What's our conversion rate? That's a huge one for us. When it comes down to providers, we are looking at, it's great to look at the lagging indicators like production and collections, but we're more refocusing on leading indicators, which would be things like, for hygienists, what's your SRP percentage? What is your fluoride percentage? What's your recare, right? Are you rescheduling patients at a high rate or not? For doctors, it would be what's your per patient productivity, as an example. Case acceptance is a huge one. So those are every department's got their different metrics, and we look at them all. But as a whole, as CEOs, we're looking at what the company is doing.
Great. And do you have any tools that you use actually to measure and track those KPIs?
We have a few different tools. We get our CEO dashboard through our financial metric, through our bookkeeping and financial. We have a fractional CFO who can do that for us. That because we ultimately need to see a scorecard. We need to have it at our fingertips every month so we can go make change as needed. At the practice level, just to get KPIs, we use a plugin that we use Jarvis that just plugs in. It's a third-party analytics that they have direct integration with Ascend. I think we get the data we need, and we're able to, as Anushka was saying, impact the leading indicators as opposed to just focusing on the production and the collection, because that's in the past, right? You can't change that. And is there something I'm forgetting here?
I think the main thing was Jarvis when it comes to the practice level. Of course, I think Ascend's got really good reports, but it's just much easier. We can kind of make Jarvis look at how we want it to look. So as an example, all of our doctors have logins. Their homepage can look exactly like how we want them to see it, which is really nice.
You touched on something, about, growing top line. There's only so much that you can cut. Um, and some of this might actually make sense. It might be, and as I kind of think about this, it's, is the top line growth coming from more patients? Is it coming from more treatment acceptance? Is it a combination of the two? Any thoughts on how you're growing that top line?
100%. You want to take this?
It's a combination of all of the above. I think, we've realized that every little tweak we make is creating some sort of growth. So it's a 1% tweak here, it's 3% there, and somehow we're at 20%. Definitely, I think first of all, things even as simple as fee renegotiations have helped with that. The second piece is working with our doctors on case acceptance has been huge. In our experience, I don't know how it is for other groups, but we have a good number of new grads and they come in and their case acceptance is like 15%. How do we get them up to at least 40%? That's what we're working on. I think that's been a huge growth indicator for us. And adding providers, adding hygienists, adding doctors has been huge just because availability is so important. We expanded our practice, all of our practices, basically, we've expanded their hours to have that availability rather than, you're going to the dentist's office and they're closed at 3 p.m. That wasn't going to work for us.
Yeah, I'll add maybe a couple more. I think we realized you have to make two types of moves. You have to make linear moves and you have to make exponential moves in order to grow the top line. Linear is some of the things that Anushka you mentioned, but also some, minor tweaks. But these aren't tweaks that they all add up to about 5 to 10% of profitability at the end of the month. That's nothing to scoff at. Exponential moves would be really looking at what other service lines can you add to your business? Can you add Invisalign? Can you start to do more implants? Can your doctors do more implants? I think those are the exponential moves that can create outsized results at the end of the day that can add $1 to $2 million of revenue into your business and very quickly increase your profitability. So I would look at linear moves and exponential moves, both.
Question that came in here, questioning the growth, not necessarily the percentage, but how are you measuring that? Is this a revenue across all locations? So where does that 20% come from? Is it, are you looking at that as kind of a goal that you set for each practice location? And also, are you balancing your cash flow? So are we sacrificing, so we're getting the growth, but our costs have gone up. As you mentioned, our overhead continues to go up and you've got to grow that top line to hopefully more than what your overhead is grow. But it seems like in general, dentistry is really struggling with that. You're growing top line, but your overhead is overtaking that.
Yeah, we're never sacrificing cash flow in our business. That's just never going to happen. I think we live and die by this saying, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king and queen, right? So ultimately, when you make linear moves and exponential moves, especially when you're starting to make linear moves, when you increase hygiene productivity by $20 an hour, that gives you, because your fixed costs are the same at the end of the day, right? Your fixed costs aren't changing. You have chairs, you have lights that you have to keep on, you have utility bills that you've got to pay. But if you make these little tweaks in your business that are marginal, your profitability would actually start to be 40 to 50% when you start to optimize your additional dental chairs that you have, right? Yes, overall, I think the industry talks about, oh, if Heartland can do 18%, how can we do 20 or 30? What Heartland doesn't tell you is the minimum they want is 18%. Some of their practices are turning out 50% profit margins, right? So I think we have to be careful with those types of generalizations. And then the exponential moves are where you really start to add to your bottom line, because you've got the facility, you've got the chairs, now you add providers, to Anushka's point, the provider headcount, you add hygiene, and now you really tweak those scorecards, those leading indicators, and you grow your top line revenue, because that should all become profit at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think that, as far as 20%, right? We look at the business as a whole. But that said, if one practice was doing 50% and all the rest were doing 5%, we wouldn't be happy with that. Every practice has to be doing well, or we're really doing a deep dive into what's going on there.
Right.
But inevitably, some are going to be, 18 and some are going to be 25. That's just how it is.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think we'd be remiss. We're about 10 minutes before we finish things up here. I think we need to address AI at some level. And of course, this could be and probably should be its own webinar, but we've got 10 minutes to discuss it, or maybe 5, and save a little bit of time for another question or two that comes in. AI, maybe we can talk a little bit about clinical AI solutions, and then maybe operational AI solutions that you may be using, if any.
Yeah, I think so. Clinical, everyone's talking about clinical. It's we use Overjet as our AI software. I think it's really useful, again, especially in my experience for new grads, because they're still learning, like their X-ray eye is still developing. But more importantly, on the patient side, patients can't read X-rays. I've walked into rooms many a time where I've seen somebody pointing out something on an X-ray. I'm like, your patient can't read this. But with Overjet, it's really changed things because it's marking things in red. As Abhishek always says, red's the universal color of danger. So when you have a bright red thing on the screen and you're like, hey, this is a large cavity, it makes it a lot easier for patients to understand. As far as on the operational side, we're big fans of Patient Prism. There was a time where we had to have somebody rating calls that our patient care ambassadors or practice leaders were taking, and that's very, very manual. With Patient Prism, we've been able to eliminate that the whole manual side of it. And it essentially, you can put in the prompts that you want to hear, and it'll essentially grade the call. It's been exceptional.
Any thoughts on we had a couple questions come in about replacing people at the front desk with AI, and I mean, I know there are solutions out there. Probably we're not quite there yet, or even something that we may want to do. I guess the theory would be to free them up to do other things besides answer the phone. So right now you have a live person answering the phone. Patient Prism is monitoring that call and maybe providing help, right? So you can almost train them for maybe missed opportunities. And so that's really what you're doing right now.
We're testing out some AI products. I think AI, to your point, Bill, AI voice is still in its sort of infancy, right? There isn't one particular product that we could confidently say we love it, because again, they have really good human-like voice, but there's still a little glitchy. I don't think they're there yet. But I think it's evolving so fast. In about 6 months, I think it'll be nailed down, and then we'll pull the trigger. We don't want to be too early in its adoption either, where they're still figuring out the kinks. But I do think a point about what you said, like it might replace some people. I think that's generally the fear. I think AI will replace some mediocre type people, but the really talented people, AI is really a complement, not a replacement.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Back to cost savings. We talked a lot about overhead. Are you using any kind of procurement platforms?
We don't. We've looked into them. Very honestly, we're Patterson customers, and we've kind of thought about it in the past. We came to the conclusion that when we are working with one company, we're getting, first of all, better service. And it's kind of like a one-stop shop for us. So for our purposes, our supply costs are, where they need to be. So I think that's the route we're going to take moving, at least for the near future.
Yeah, we'd rather beat up one company than try to beat up 10.
Yeah, and there is the relationship there and the service that is provided and things like that. So yeah, if everything becomes commoditized, I think you lose some of those, from the service side, the training, implementation help. I mean, that's where it's hard to put a dollar amount on that. There's tons of value there, but if sometimes I think you can commoditize everything and can become an issue.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
We have 5 minutes left. Just tons of great questions here. Another one came in here. I mean, it's not really technology focused, so I think I'll bypass that one. How about Yeah, how about I let you maybe have the final like 4 or 5 minutes really, just because I know we had 120 plus people register and we probably had about 70 questions come in. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. Is there anything you feel like we didn't address or anything you'd like to kind of do to kind of wrap everything and discuss before we end this?
I think you, as usual, Bill, did an excellent job of moderating. One thing that I think for dentists, I'm going to assume the majority of people on this webinar are dentists. Um, and maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my assumption.
Yep.
It's,
You're right.
when we're talking about cash flow and profitability, look, all of this AI, all this technology is great, but you can have it all, you just can't have it all at once. So maybe figuring out what is the biggest impact move, what's the most exponential move before we start making those linear moves. Um, as an example, is it time to go to cloud-based software? Yes, I think that's an exponential move versus, do I really need this $50,000 scanner? Can I get the Medit for 12,000 that'll help me? I think those are probably some things to think about to keep that cash flow healthy.
Yeah, you literally pulled the words out of my mouth. I think you have to make both moves. I think that's what I would leave this webinar with is make linear moves and make exponential moves. That's how you grow your top line at the end of the day without sacrificing profitability.
Excellent. I've got one more poll and then I've got a couple of slides I want to share with you, but this is this is the one I accidentally shared at the beginning, but if you're interested in learning anything more about these different solutions out there, whether it's Dentrix or whether it's something else that we may have discussed or Areo may have mentioned, just give us a yes here and we can follow up with you. If you're not interested, that's fine too, but that'll help out quite a bit so we know who to follow up with. And also, let me give just another second here, a couple more seconds to give us a yes or no, and then I will end the poll. All right, there we go. One more. All right, one more there. Thank you. So we've got a bunch of people that are interested, so I don't necessarily need to share the results there, but I appreciate that. Let me do a screen share. If you want to actually just scan here. You can find out more about Dentrix Ascend, and you can find out, we talked a little bit about imaging and AI, billing and payments, pretty much covered all of that. You can actually just scan that QR code, or if you answered yes, we can follow up with you as well. And what I also wanted to do in the final minute is share. So hopefully everybody scanned this that wanted to scan this. You can feel free to reach out to me, Bill, at Group Dentistry Now, too, if you have any questions. If we happen to not answer a question that you wanted answered, we've got the people that weren't anonymous. We know who you are, so we'll try and get back to you. For anonymous, it's going to be tough, but you can reach out to me. Anushka and Abhishek were kind enough to provide their email addresses here. So if you are a provider or you are working at a group and you want to reach out to them, you have any questions, feel free to email them. You can visit their website. And they also have a podcast. Do you want to talk? We've got one more minute if you want to mention your podcast, which is really great.
We appreciate it. Yeah, it's called Filling You In, a dental podcast by A Squared. The running joke for my brother is that because both of our names start with A, we're A Squared. But it's not just dentists. It's not just people in the dental industry. It's just people from all walks of life. It's been great for us. It's people that we know and we trust and think have a lot of great insight to share. So if you're interested, you can check it out. It's on YouTube or on LinkedIn as well. We post on there.
And it's
Yep.
also on it's also on our website.
Yeah, it's right. You can go to areodental.com, and I found that on your website just before we started this webinar. Well, thank you both. Really great conversation, and apologies to the people that we weren't able to get to your questions. I think we answered a good chunk of them. I knew we weren't going to get to all 70 for sure, but there were some general themes, and I think we handled them really well. So until next time, and again, for everybody out there, the recording will be available. It'll be available later on this evening on our website and then also on our YouTube channel. Our website, again, if you don't know, is groupdentistrynow.com. Thank you both. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure to have you on a webinar or a podcast, and hope to see you both in person soon.
Pleasure is ours. Thank you so much.
Yep. And thank you everybody for joining us today. Until the next time, this is the DSO Study Club, and this is Group Dentistry Now.